Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine being, well, right at the center of a media storm for almost 10 years. Countless headlines, public narratives. Everyone thinks they know your story.
Right.
And then, after 9 years of near total silence, one of India's most controversial figures sits down for a really long, candid interview.
The big question is, why now? And what's his side of the story? The one most people think they already know inside out.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. You, the listener, brought us these excerpts from a pretty significant new interview. It's a long conversation with Vijay Mallya.
Yeah, the businessman everyone links with the Kingfisher Airlines collapse and, this massive ongoing legal fight.
Our main source for this deep dive is the transcript from that interview. It's a YouTube video. Vijay Mallya podcast, Rise and Downfall of Kingfisher Airlines, Loans in RCB FO364, Shamani.
And our mission today is really to get into this conversation. We want to pull out the key insights, the claims he's making, the specific details he offers. A lot of it directly challenges, well, the story most people have heard.
It's about understanding his narrative, unfiltered, after all this time.
Exactly. What does he say happened?
All right, so let's jump in. First big question he tackles. Why speak now? What made him break that long silence?
Well, he's pretty clear on his main reason. He says for 9 years, he feels he's been through what he calls a vicious, relentless trial by media in India, and that this created, intensely negative stories, making him a kind of lightning rod for public anger, as he puts it.
So his feeling was that traditional media just wouldn't tell his side fairly.
That's exactly it. He says flat out he didn't think they'd report his side truthfully. So he saw, like, new media, podcasts like this one, as a chance to finally tell his story directly, without that filter.
Okay. And he also mentioned something specific, something more recent, that he feels gave him a factual foothold to speak out.
Yes, he points to an official government document. He highlights the Indian Ministry of Finance's annual report for 2024-25. He says it acknowledges that 14,100 crores has been recovered from him.
Right. 14,100 crores.
What? Yeah, and he feels this official number gives him a concrete, sort of factual basis to challenge the narratives that have been out there for so long.
That's a pretty striking figure to lead with. Now, the interviewer also shared their reasons for doing the interview, didn't they?
They did. The interviewer said it was mainly curiosity, wanting to hear, the full side of the story beyond just the headlines and tweets.
Makes sense.
And also feeling a responsibility, especially with that kind of platform, to present all sides, let listeners make up their own minds.
Okay, so that sets the stage for why he's speaking. Let's rewind a bit, go back to the beginning. He talks about his early life, Kolkata, Bangalore, a strict upbringing under his father. What was that like?
He mentions two key things his father stressed. One was education. His dad apparently told him, "You're not stepping into the business unless you're academically good enough." The other was a pretty stark warning about the socialist policies back then. His father apparently said the government might just take the business away, and all he'd have left was his education. Mallya says that really stuck with him.
And he specifically pushes back against a common idea about his childhood, that he was, a spoiled kid.
Oh, he really contests that.
Yeah.
Says he was anything but. Started working at 17, management trainee while still in college, earning just 400 rupees a month.
Right, and he mentions the car.
Yeah, driving a second-hand Standard Herald. He brings that up specifically to counter the image of him having flashy cars from day one. He calls these false narratives people's perceptions.
He also describes his early training in the UB group. Sounds very hands-on.
It does. Very thorough, according to him. Working in different departments, sales, visiting shops, accounts, learning finance, marketing, dealing with the ad agencies.
And abroad, too.
Yes, his father sent him overseas for training. America, and notably England, where he worked as a paint foreman, literally mixing paint at night. He calls it training with no forgiveness, but says it gave him great grounding.
That grounding must have been vital because he had to take over UB Group really young when his father died suddenly.
Yeah, just past 27. His father was only 59. He says he was thrown into the deep end, but felt that training had prepared him.
And he immediately changed the management style compared to his father.
That's a key point he makes. He moved away from his father's very hands-on micromanaging style. He brought in what he calls a decentralized accountability structure.
Meaning?
Regular monthly review meetings for each business line, empowering younger professional managers. He notes the average age of regional directors dropped significantly in 5 years, like from 60-65 down to around 40, promoting from within.
He argues this freed him up, this decentralized approach, allowed him to chase other things, like becoming an NRI in '88.
Exactly. He says the reason for becoming a non-resident Indian was specifically to pursue international business, the main goal, acquiring the global operations of Burger Paints, based in the UK.
And that worked out well for him.
He describes it as a big success. Used a leveraged buyout, borrowing money to buy the company, then did IPOs, stock market listings, in places like Jamaica, Kenya, Singapore to pay off the debt. Eventually sold it profitably in 1996.
And that deal seems particularly important to him personally.
Absolutely. He calls it the moment he made his first serious piece of money himself. He emphasizes that, distinguishing it from inherited wealth. He even says he told his mother, "This is what I earned, so when I spend it, don't complain."
Which kind of leads us straight into his public image.
Yeah.
The whole flamboyance thing in the media, he tackles that directly.
He does. He contrasts himself, a confident public speaker, no stage fright, with his father, who he says was very shy publicly.
And he claims that flamboyance tag was basically a media creation.
That's his argument. He says when he became chairman at 28, the media compared him to the other business leaders who were generally much older, more conservative. He enjoyed, cars, drinks, parties, music, sports, normal stuff for a young guy, he says.
But because he did it publicly.
Right. Unlike his older, maybe more private counterparts, the media, he says, labeled him flamboyant. And crucially, he repeats again, he was spending his own money from his profitable businesses, not borrowed money.
Okay. And what about the famous King of Good Times nickname?
He's very clear. He didn't give himself that title. He says it came from the Kingfisher beer label itself. He created the brand personality for the beer as the King of Good Times, and then the media just started calling him that.
So he saw himself as the brand ambassador and felt the media just ran with his personal life because it sold papers.
That's how he frames it. He claims the media created this animal called Vijay Mallya because his name sold, used his parties for headlines, even if inaccurate, just to get more eyeballs, more readership. Says he didn't bother denying it then, sees no point now, except when he feels wronged, which is why he did this interview.
Speaking of brands, he clearly had a knack for marketing. Took inspiration from U.S. bank ads, apparently.
Yeah, he was really into giving brands a distinct personality. He talks about surrogate advertising, promoting the brand indirectly when you can't advertise alcohol directly in India.
Like a Kingfisher water.
Exactly. Building a big water business, using music platforms, making the Kingfisher brand very visible, very colorful, as he says.
And those core alcohol brands were undeniably successful, looking at the numbers he gives.
No question. He talks about relaunching Kingfisher beer, new packaging, marketing, sponsoring events, capturing 52% market share nationally. Huge. And McDowell's #1 whiskey becoming the world's biggest seller.
He made some bold moves, too, like buying Shaw Wallace, his main competitor.
Yeah, acquired them in 2005 for $300 million. He sees that as a top-class investment, led to creating United Spirits, USL, generated massive wealth. USL's market cap now is nearly 1 lakh crore rupees. He also loops back to Burger Paints in '88, part of his early goal to build India's first multinational.
Okay, so from building those massive brands, he then moves into airlines with Kingfisher. The perception often was that this was maybe a bit sudden, perhaps even a vanity project. Maybe for his son.
He pushes back hard on that narrative, says the idea came up around 2002, 2003. Not a whim, but a proposal brought to him by the Damana brothers, who had airline experience. They went to his CFO, who then brought it to him.
So a business proposal, not a birthday gift.
He frames it as a considered decision, fitting UB Group's history of diversifying. He calls the son's birthday gift story complete baloney, complete nonsense.
What was the initial vision for Kingfisher Airlines then?
His vision, he says, was simple. Create the best flying experience India had ever seen. Focus on safety, premium service, but also connecting new places across India. Seeing it as vital infrastructure. Interesting, though, it launched as low cost, right? Seems a bit contradictory to premium.
He explains that. It started single class, low cost, but with differentiators he thought mattered in India. In-flight entertainment and free meals.
Yeah.
He felt Indians really value food and entertainment, so those pluses were key, even in a low-cost setup.
And then it evolved.
Yeah, they added Kingfisher first, a business class, he says, because the market demanded it on certain routes.
Right.
He actually compares it to Indigo adding business class now, arguing it wasn't a dumb idea back then, just responding to the market.
He seems really proud of the service aspect.
Oh, definitely. He talks about intense training for cabin crew appearance and communication skills. Little details, like staff cleaning passengers' glasses in business class, calling customers guests. Guests, not passengers.
Right. And he shares this amazing detail. Says he personally monitored the on-time performance of every Kingfisher flight via SMS on his phone every single night for the first year.
Wow.
And initially, it worked. They became the biggest airline by 2008, he says.
Yeah, 27% market share, the largest in the country then.
But then, things changed dramatically. He points to one main trigger for the airline's collapse.
According to him, it all comes down to the global financial crisis in 2008. He says that just devastated aviation globally and in India.
And he describes this meeting he had with the finance minister at the time, Pranab Mukherjee, which he sees as absolutely pivotal.
This is a huge claim he makes. He says he went to the finance minister, explained the crisis meant he had to downsize Kingfisher, cut planes, lay off staff because he couldn't afford the costs.
And the minister said,
He claims the finance minister told him not to downsize, emphasized Kingfisher was vital for connectivity, for jobs, and assured him the banks would support them. Mallya says, quote, that is how it all started.
wow, okay. Then there is the Deccan Airways acquisition, often seen as a big mistake, mainly just to get around that 5-year rule for flying overseas.
Mallya offers a totally different logic. He calls it industry consolidation, a move to eliminate the disruptor. Deccan's 1 rupee tickets were setting crazy low price expectations, plus operational benefits.
Yeah, both used Airbus planes, so common fleet, pilots, gave them scale. He flatly denies it was mainly about the 5-year rule, calls that complete nonsense. He sees rebranding Deccan as Kingfisher Red as just standard multi-brand strategy.
He also blames specific government policies, not just the global crisis.
Definitely. He hammers the cost of aviation fuel, ATF, tied to soaring crude oil prices, $60 to $140 a barrel then. Made worse, he says, by state sales tax calculated ad valorem based on value, so as fuel price shot up, the tax amount did too.
And he asked for relief.
Says he pleaded for ATF to be made a declared good, change the tax basis, reduce the burden, but it was refused. He also points to the government blocking foreign investment in airlines then. Says he had a deal ready with Etihad, but it was denied. Permission only came 6 months after Kingfisher shut down. He feels these things conspired to create a perfect storm. And he contrasts Kingfisher's failure with how Indian aviation looks now.
Yeah, points to the current boom, the huge plane orders, suggesting if Kingfisher had just survived that storm, with its 27% market share back then, well, things could have been very different.
Okay, let's shift from the airline to his other ventures and lifestyle. The IPL team, Formula One, often tied into the flamboyant image and the accusations.
He addresses them, framing them mostly as business decisions, not just personal whims. RCB, the IPL team. He says the only reason was promoting Royal Challenge whiskey after buying Shaw Wallace. Calls it a top-class investment now, a profitable business. Mentions picking a young Virat Kohli, too.
And the Formula One team, Force India.
That came from his passion for racing, he admits. But the decision to buy a team was a platform. To put the Indian flag on the grid, he says, at the top of motorsport, and advertise his brands globally. He sees it as bold, worthwhile. Only sold it later, he claims, because of his legal issues.
The Kingfisher calendar is another one everyone remembers.
Right. An idea from photographer Atul Kasbecker, he says, like the Pirelli calendar, a marketing tool for the brand, but also launched careers. Deepika Padukone, Katrina Kaif.
What about the cars and properties? He acknowledges those passions.
He does. Loves cars. Mentions his vintage collection, restoring old Maharaja cars, which he notes can't be exported. Properties. Says he has some via a family trust overseas, but claims the media exaggerated the number. Shares that story about the Bangalore bungalow on the Kingfisher Tower where he grew up. Started as a joke to put the old house on top, but it's unfinished because of the liquidation.
And the key point he keeps making about funding all this.
He insists, repeatedly. He paid for his lifestyle, parties, events, IPL F1 with his money, from his other successful businesses, not Kingfisher Airlines funds. Which brings us right to the heart of it, the financial and legal mess. The loans, the guarantees, the recovery. This is central.
So from his side, how did Kingfisher actually get the loans?
He explains it was a consortium, a group of banks lending together. He stresses the banks did their own due diligence, their own appraisals, and critically, he gave a personal guarantee, and UBHL, the parent company, gave a corporate guarantee. He argues this shows he wasn't planning to cheat anyone from the start. Why guarantee it if you plan to run?
He also highlights his own money put into the airline, which he feels gets ignored.
Yes, he emphasizes infusing 3,000 crores, that's 30 billion rupees of UB group money, into Kingfisher to try and keep it flying. points out even people like Kiran Mazumdar Shah have publicly said how much of his own wealth he risked.
And the collateral for those loans, the story often focused just on the Kingfisher brand value.
He says that's wrong. It was a multiple basket. Included valuable stocks from profitable UB companies like United Spirits, United Breweries, Plus Properties, as well as the bland value in airline shares. He argues the media cherry-picked the weak parts of the collateral to fit a narrative.
And he makes a very clear distinction about who actually borrowed the money.
This is a point he hammers home. Very clearly states, Vijay Mallya has never borrowed a single rupee from anybody ever. It was Kingfisher Airlines that borrowed. I was a guarantor. There's a big difference. He feels this is fundamentally misunderstood or misrepresented. He doesn't deny the airline had serious cash flow problems, though, affecting payments everywhere.
No, he accepts that. When cash flow dries up, everyone gets hit: oil companies, airports, caterers, and yes, staff. He acknowledges payments weren't made across the board.
The non-payment of salaries became a huge, very emotional issue. He talks about that directly.
He says it seriously pained him, especially given UB Group's reputation for treating employees well. But here's a crucial claim. He says money was available to pay staff, specifically over 260 crores of UBHL cash, frozen by the Karnataka High Court.
Frozen cash.
Yes. And he states he formally applied to the court to release that specific cash just to pay Kingfisher staff salaries. But, he claims, the banks objected, and so the court refused permission.
What about the reports that international staff got paid but Indian staff didn't?
He puts that down to where the money was. Says ticket money collected in England was available, so international staff could be paid from that. But the money in India, meant for Indian staff, was stuck because of the court order and the bank's objection.
He also takes issue with the figures reported about his own salary.
Calls the 33 crore annual salary figure completely false, challenges anyone to show proof from a balance sheet, and states he personally did not take a salary when others weren't being paid.
There was also the tragic suicide of an employee's wife, often linked to the unpaid salaries.
He says he was aware, claims an investigation showed it was due to a long-standing marital issue. But he acknowledges it was convenient for some to blame Kingfisher's non-payment. Expresses sympathy, but stands by the investigation findings.
He does offer an apology, though, about the employees in Kingfisher failing.
Yes, publicly apologizes, says he's deeply sorry that some of them didn't get paid, adds, I take full responsibility for the failure of Kingfisher Airlines as a business, says he did my very best, put in my money, blood, sweat, and tears. It didn't work. But sticks to the point that the frozen funds stopped him paying salaries when he says the cash was there.
The big 60th birthday party in late 2015 also comes up, often criticized.
He points to the timing. December 2015, that's 3 years after Kingfisher shut down in October 2012. Says he paid for it himself, not KFA funds. Admits maybe it was a mistake not having it privately, but says the media latched onto it because he lived openly.
Okay, let's turn to the investigations. CBI, ED.
He claims the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, initially had no allegation of money siphoning against him personally, says their first focus was on alleged misrepresentation to IDBI Bank, maybe about brand valuation or collusion, and using loan money for a private jet, which he argues was Kingfisher's asset, not his personal jet.
And the specific charge of colluding with IDBI management for that loan.
He counters that by saying the IDBI board approved the loan, and that board included people from the Reserve Bank of India and the Ministry of Finance. He also points out IDBI later got all its money back, 753 crores, by 2021. Says that was public knowledge because IDBI is listed. This is where he really pushes back on being seen as guilty already.
He argues that in India, once charges are filed, the public often assumes guilt. But the principal should be innocent until proven guilty. Says he's still waiting for CBI and ED to show proof of guilt, and that he has a robust defense ready for trial.
And he keeps coming back to those official government figures on recovery.
Yes, this is central to his argument now. Cites that Ministry of Finance 2425 report and a finance minister's statement from Desk 2024, both, he says, acknowledging 14,100 crores recovered from him. He contrasts that huge number with the original DRT debt figure to challenge the core or thief image. Asked directly, where did the 14,000 crores come from, if not the assets he pledged?
He calls the current situation with the banks a pitiful state of affairs. Why?
This is really quite something. He claims that despite asking repeatedly, the banks have refused to give him a statement of account showing exactly what's been recovered and what the debt status is now. No statement.
That's his claim. He says both the DRT's recovery officer and the official liquidator handling UPHL have stated in court the banks are fully paid. But because the banks won't give him the statement, he's gone to the Karnataka High Court to try and force them to. Says it's highly unusual globally not to get an account statement, and this ties into the willful defaulter label he was given.
Yes. He defines willful defaulter as having money but choosing not to pay. Argues his assets were frozen in 2016, so how could he pay? Plus, he claims he made 4 settlement offers to the banks between 2012 and 2015-16. Says they were refused. Why would they refuse?
He suggests they waited, maybe knowing the value of his pledged shares in profitable companies would go up, which they did, allowing them to recover far more that 14,100 crore figure compared to the DRT debt of 600 and 203 crores plus interest back then. Says he has proof of the settlement offers in Supreme Court records. He also questions the 9,000 crore figure often mentioned even by the Prime Minister.
Yeah, he says he's baffled by that number, since the DRT debt was certified at 16,203 crores plus interest. He suggests the use of such a figure, especially by the PM, points to keen governmental interest, making him feel like a political football.
Okay, let's talk about his departure from India, March 2nd, 2016, and his life now in the UK.
That date is so central to the public story. How does he explain leaving then?
Very clearly states it was a pre-scheduled visit. An FIA motorsport meeting in Geneva, planned months ahead. Claims he even told the finance minister, Arun Jaitley, he was leaving before he went to the airport. He absolutely denies knowing about any Supreme Court hearing scheduled for the next day, March 3rd, which was widely reported, argues the media storm that erupted right after he left created such a hostile environment that coming back immediately just wasn't feasible.
But how did he end up basically stuck in the UK?
He says his Indian passport was revoked in April 2016, not just suspended, revoked. Claims the Ministry of External Affairs said he didn't reply to summons, which he disputes. This revocation, he argues, is what physically stopped him returning, even though he's been a UK resident since 1988, has indefinite leave to remain since 92. Feels he has a constitutional right to a passport as a citizen.
He's obviously faced extradition proceedings in the UK.
Acknowledges the legal fights there, yes. But clarifies the UK court's job was only to see if there was a prima facie case, enough initial evidence to stand trial in India. It wasn't deciding guilt or innocence. Notes there are still ongoing legal processes in the UK too.
And he repeats his defense against the specific Indian charges.
Maintains the allegations, misrepresentation, collusion, misusing funds, lack proof. Argues airlines need lots of foreign currency legitimately for fuel abroad. Lisa says this explains alleged diversions like the 423 crore CBI claim. Questions the ED's 3,547 crore money laundering charge. How is it laundering if the money wasn't stolen and the debt's being recovered? Says he has a robust defense for trial.
Does he think leaving India made things worse for him?
Admits it probably worsened public perception, which turned incredibly negative, but insists he left on a scheduled flight and the environment only turned hostile after he'd gone.
What's his life like now in the UK?
Describes it as semi-retired. Spends time with his dogs, works on his classic cars, says he still runs businesses outside India, his core alcohol interests mainly, and that these businesses fund his huge legal bills in the UK and India. Being stuck in one country since 2016, passport revoked, he calls a game changer for someone used to constant travel, but says he tries to get on with life. Does he talk about feeling isolated? Who's supported him?
Says he's learned who true friends are. Politicians vanished, he notes. But some corporate friends, he mentions Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw again, have stayed close and supportive.
He clearly feels misunderstood by the media and public.
Very much so. Believes the media hate his guts, his words, because he hasn't just crumbled and collapsed. Feels his toughness, his refusal to seem weak, gets interpreted as arrogance. Says 50 years in business toughened him up.
How does he feel about the Kingfisher failure itself, looking back?
Expresses real sadness and hurt. Says he wasn't used to business failure, gave it his blood, sweat, and tears. Sees the government refusing the potential Etihad investment as the final straw, leaving him no options to save it.
Does he talk about fear? Being prepared for, well, the worst outcome legally.
Acknowledges the legal threats. Says he's prepared for the worst. Understands that could mean jail in India. Will fight his case hard in court, but knows the outcome is uncertain. Calls it a journey from hero to zero.
He also mentions his religious faith.
Says he's deeply religious.
Yeah.
Mentions big donations to temples funding the gold roof at Sabarimala, gold plating at Tirupati. Says despite everything, he doesn't question God's will.
Winning the legal case seems to mean more to him than just avoiding jail or getting money back.
Yes, he stresses winning on merit is vital. because he genuinely believes he's done nothing wrong, criminally, that he's not a criminal.
If he could talk to his younger self.
Says he'd stress core values, hard work, dedication, which he feels he's always had. But reflecting on Kingfisher, maybe he should regret listening to the finance minister back then. Maybe he should have downsized when he saw the crisis coming, feels that might have saved the airline.
He also tackles that image of extreme wealth.
Calls it a major misconception. Blames the media, focus on the calendar, parties, events, the marketing stuff, for creating that super rich image. Repeats, he wasn't using KFA money for that. And notes, now, with Indian assets seized, he's definitely not super rich.
And did he ever try to manage that public image?
Claims he never even tried. Says the media created the narrative to sell their product. Didn't bother fighting it then, sees little point now, except to address being wronged. Hence this interview.
And he actually refers to specific documents during the interview to back up his financial points.
Yes, holds up, or refers to, the DRT recovery certificate from 2017. Debt 603 crores plus interest. Contrast it with the Ministry of Finance 24-25 report. 14,100 crores recovered, and PM Modi's reported 9,000 crore figure. Uses these different official or reported numbers to ask, has the debt actually been recovered or not?
He boils down the entire legal case to one thing.
Says the root cause is purely financial. No other criminal charges he's aware of. Argues if the government's own report says 14,100 crores is recovered more than the original debt, then the core issue, the debt, should be settled.
But he knows the argument has shifted.
Right. Says it now seems to be about intention. Did he have money and willfully refuse to pay? He links the banks refusing his earlier settlement offers to the later share price boom, letting them recover much more. Says he's ready for trial specifically on that intention point.
And given that 14,100 crore recovery figure from the government report,
he makes a really pointed remark. Says he might be the only core thief being called a core after, according to the government's own figures, repaying 2.5 times the original debt.
His final thought seems to be about how he'll be remembered.
Yeah. Says he wants to be remembered for any good he did, certainly not for being a jaw.
Wow. Okay, taking this deep dive into the source, hearing directly from Vijay Mallya after, 9 years of a very different public narrative, it really untacks a story with so many complex layers, so many counterclaims. Definitely. We've gone through his background, the rise and fall of Kingfisher as he tells it, his lifestyle choices as he frames them, the incredibly tangled legal and financial fight.
All alongside his specific claims challenging those dominant narratives.
It really underscores how many conflicting angles can exist in one huge public story. Like Mallya himself said, his goal was, the idea was for you, the listener, to listen, think, and question.
And maybe that's the key takeaway here. You have this core discrepancy he highlights, pointing to official documents. A government report apparently stating 14,100 crores recovered, far more, he argues, than the original certified debt.
Yet the legal cases continue, and the public image remains overwhelmingly negative.
So what does that tell you about how information travels, how public opinion gets cemented, and maybe about the legal process itself when a case becomes such a massive public spectacle?
A lot to think about there, definitely.